Is it possible for us to survive and even come back from the current environmental apocalypse? Check it out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. And on the line with us is Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. He is a former EPA official who actually helped found the EPA's Department of Environmental Justice, their Office of Environmental Justice, and now has some thoughts and some concern. His website, by the way, MustafaSantiagoAli.com, spelled pretty much just exactly the way it sounds. The Twitter handle is EJIN Action. And Dr. Ali, welcome back to the program. I see that Trump's current EPA chief has a new vision for the agency that some critics are calling apocalyptic, that it'll produce a devastated planet. First of all, welcome back to the program. And secondly, I'm curious your thoughts on the direction that the EPA has taken versus where it was at when you were there.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me again. You know, it's dangerous. It's extremely dangerous for everyone in our country, but especially for our most vulnerable communities. Communities that have been disproportionately impacted for decades upon decades in some instances. And now with this administration, you know, they have placed crosshairs on these communities, the sacrifice zones, if you will, the dumping grounds for everything that nobody else wants in our country. And because of that, they put people in very dangerous situations, both from pollution and from viruses and from the impacts from climate change.
So what was the EPA doing about this when you were there, and how has that changed?
Well, when I was there, you know, I started off at the Environmental Protection Agency as a student, and then over the years, you know, worked my way up the ladder. It was focused on our most vulnerable communities, on environmental justice communities. That trust that had to be built took time. It took folks being transparent and honest. It also made sure that vulnerable communities, communities of color, lower wealth communities, and indigenous brothers and sisters had a seat at the table to help to frame out the policies that would impact them either in a negative or a positive direction. And of course, we were focused on the positive and making sure that, you know, we were minimizing and mitigating air pollution and water pollution, and also, of course, dealing with the issues on our lands. So now this administration, as everyone has seen, you know, over 100 environmental and climate rollbacks from this administration have sent a very clear message. The lives in these communities don't have value. And it's easy to sort of analyze that, even though I know this administration places no value whatsoever on science. And, of course, they have a very tenuous relationship with the law. You can very easily see we've got 100,000 people who are dying each year in our country prematurely from air pollution. You know, the previous administrations, both Democrat and Republicans, and we should call that out because I worked under both of those, knew that you had to figure out a way to lessen the impacts that were happening from both air pollution and water pollution and other forms of pollution. And each of those times, people were trying to figure out, well, how do we strengthen what's there so that people are more protected? This administration has taken a completely different path where the lives in those communities have been of no value because they have not been a part of the overall analysis that has happened.
So one of the things that I'm familiar with is coal ash. You know, when power plants burn coal, there's this ash that's left over that's highly toxic. It's got concentrated heavy metals in it. It's got radioactive substances in it. It's got, high fraction hydrocarbons still, remnants in it that cause cancer, causes all kinds of diseases. And I know in a couple of major cities that this was basically, they just create these giant piles of this stuff, and they would locate them next door to most generally African-American communities, poor communities of color. Is that the sort of thing that is, happening all over the country and has been for years and years? And is that the sort of thing you're talking about? Or is there another example that better illustrates specifically, what you're concerned about here?
Well, that's one example. But we're also, concerned, let's just real quickly run through some of the things that they've done. So, we had worked before to have the Clean Power Plan in place to limit emissions especially, focusing on vulnerable communities, but overall to lower emissions for our country and for our planet. They did not see any value in that. When you look at the clean car rule, we know that, and I'm sorry, Tom, let's just call it out like it is. We know that systemic racism has played a role historically in many of the policies that we have, whether we're talking about transportation or housing or the environment. So when you roll back something like, the clean car rule, we know that in many instances, our roads and highways have been used to separate certain communities, move wealth into some communities, and dump off pollution into others. So when you're saying that the pollution that's coming out of the back of those tailpipes, it's okay for that to continue or to actually increase, then you're also sending a message to those vulnerable communities who are, in many instances, the ones who are closely located to our roads and our highways, that, it's okay for you to have those additional impacts. When you look at stuff like mercury, or not mercury, but actually methane, that you have these impacts that will happen both to the air pollution by exacerbating and making it stronger, and at the same time also warming up our planet. And we know that in many instances, our climate emergency hits, vulnerable communities first and worst. And mercury is another example. We know that it has impacts on women and babies, and a number of other types of challenges that come out of that. But they're saying it's okay for there to be more mercury that is in our environment, if you will. So there's a laundry list of things that these folks have done, which makes it really hard to believe that they care about the lives inside of our country.
Two data points here, and I'm wondering if there's an intersection or if these are merely coincidences. The first is Donald Trump put a coal industry lobbyist, Mr. Wheeler, in charge of the Environmental Protection Agency, which is what I was thinking when I was thinking coal ash. And the second is that he has ordered federal agencies to stop diversity training or racial sensitivity training, to stop educating federal workforces about the unique challenges that people of color in this country have historically faced and today face. Respond to those, please.
Well, I'm not sure how you can justify putting someone in charge of an environmental and public health agency who has spent their entire career in trying to fight the mission of that agency. So therefore, you must not see value in it. And when you raise your right hand, like all of us had to do when we became taking on federal service, I'm not sure how you live up to that mission or to that oath that you've taken. On the other side of it, by limiting folks' ability to unpack how racism has played a role in the location of many of our most toxic facilities, how it has played a role in rulemaking and policy development, says that, once again, you're not interested in getting at the core of where our problems lie. So when you say you can't have diversity training, then you're saying that those sets of conversations, which are so critical, are not important to your decision-making process. And it also sends a very clear message that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which says that you can't discriminate in the use of federal funds, and a number of the other areas that fall underneath of that, are not that important. And it sends a message also to our states